guys, welcome back to another video. Welcome to my channel if you're new. This is the first video I'm filming of 2024, so happy new year. I cannot wait to document what this year has in store with all of you. For today's video, I'm going to be doing a video I've been waiting to do for basically a whole year, and that is my 2023 reading guide. I'm going to be sharing with you the best and the worst books I read this past year. Last year I did this video on all the books I read in 2022, and I basically sped through all of the books I read, but I wanted to do something different this year. So instead of sharing with you all 55 books I read in 2023, I'm going to be sharing with you 23 books and just going a little bit more in depth with those. I will have my Goodreads account linked down below. It is basically a social media page for everyone who loves books. So if you're not on there and you love to read, I would highly recommend checking it out. I'm going to get into the 23 books I picked to talk about for 2023. I split up this video into mainly talking about the best books because I don't just want to sit here and talk smack on the books I didn't like. I have a very subjective opinion, so just because I don't like a book or I have a certain, stance on it doesn't mean you shouldn't read it. Just keep that in mind. The first one we have is The Paris Apartment. I absolutely love this book. It follows the main protagonist whose brother goes missing from his Paris apartment. She has to go to his apartment and kind of put all the clues together and figure out where he went, but then she gets all tangled up in the world of all of his neighbors in this Paris apartment complex. I thought the characters and just the narration and timing of the book really work. Next we have Beautiful World, Where Are You by Sally Rooney. She is one of my favorite authors and she really surprised me with her writing. Something I love about Sally Rooney is how human-like and just how realistic her characters are in the sense of the life experiences they go through and the emotions and just the interactions. It all feels so real and I really connect with all the characters that she creates, and so Beautiful World, Where Are You was not an exception and I absolutely loved it. Next we have People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. Now I have picked this up multiple times. The first time was the beginning of 2021, so almost 3 years ago, and I could not get through it. I don't know what it was, but in 2023 I finally finished it and I absolutely loved it. It was a childhood friends to ex-friends to being forced together on vacation, ending up being lovers. I loved that trope. I think it worked really well, and I'm so glad I gave that book another chance because I really enjoyed it. It is one of my favorite books from her. This next book is definitely a wild card for me, and that is Family of Liars by E. Lockhart. For some context, this book is the prequel to We Were Liars. Did not like that book at all. It had a very unreliable narrator, and it isn't until the last 20 pages you find out why that narrator is the way she is. It just left me so confused for the entire novel, and so with that, I just had a really bad taste in my mouth from We Were Liars. So you're thinking, why would I pick up the prequel? I love the idea of old money set in like the 80s, 90s, murder, mystery, family drama, and that is basically what Family of Liars is. There's no unreliable narrator, and what I liked about We Were Liars is, all of those characteristics I described. So Family of Liars makes sense, and it is a concise plot, and it builds the universe for We Were Liars. This book I have so many feelings about, but I'm gonna keep it quick, and that is The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. This book left me sobbing. It was very existential. There's so many thoughts I have on it, and if you want to check out my Goodreads review, I'm going to put it on the screen right here. It really just put everything in my life into perspective. I would highly recommend this book. It didn't even feel like fiction. It felt like I was reading someone's life story, and I really cannot wait to read more Matt Haig books this year. It is safe to say Taylor Jenkins Reid is one of my favorite authors ever. Daisy Jones and the Six is my favorite book of all time. A close second is Carrie Soto is Back, which I read last year. I think it's about a fictional tennis player, Carrie Soto, her relationship with her tennis coach father, and there's just so much that goes into the character of Carrie Soto, and I've never read a character like her. I would highly, highly, highly recommend that book. It was one of my favorite books I read in 2023. This next book I also really enjoyed. Well, I enjoyed all of them, but I really loved Call It What You Want by Alyssa. I'm gonna mess up her name. I actually am friends with her on Goodreads because I rated and reviewed her book. I I really enjoyed this book because it was a change of pace. It basically followed a on and off college couple, and it just felt super realistic. Now, it doesn't have, spoiler alert, like a typical ending you would want it to have, but I think what I enjoyed about the book is how much I connected to the main character and her story throughout this relationship and her friendships. There wasn't a lot of toxicity, and I really enjoyed watching her progress and basically grow and mature into the woman she deserved to be, and really realizing her self-worth. And I feel like I went on that journey with her. This book, we will be exploring the following books in this new year, and that is A Court of Thorns and Roses, aka ACOTAR. I really want to get into fantasy books in the new year. I used to love them in middle school, but there's so many new ones that I've seen my friends talk about, and I just need to get on the train. But ACOTAR, it's something else. My friend Danny really begged me to read this book, and it did not disappoint. It was very, very interesting. I could not tell you the plot, but it's a lot, and it's really good. Dating You, Hating You by Christina Lauren is another book I enjoyed this year. It had a very interesting trope, which was Hollywood agents feuding to lovers, if that makes sense. It really was interesting. At the time I read this book, I was actually interning for a talent agency. So to read about this like fantasy, like rivalry to lovers, and like read about real life talent agency things, and like actually then working for a talent agency, it was kind of cool, and I loved that connection. I remember there was something about the book I didn't like, but I wanted to include it just because of that connection, and I mean, I enjoyed it overall. I love everything film industry wise, and so the next book I read is Nora Goes Off Script that I really enjoyed, and this book followed a young, from Massachusetts small town mom who writes a movie about her divorce. They film it like at her house in this like tea room she has. She falls in love with the main actor who plays her husband. Thought it was very interesting, and all the reviews said Chris Evans is giving the actor, like that's his vibe. So I pictured Chris Evans throughout the book, and that really made me love it more. I read a total of 6 books this year by Frida McFadden. So the 2 books that stood out to me were, I guess, like a series, and that is the Housemaid series. Out of all her books I've read, those were the first 2 books, The Housemaid, I think The Housemaid's Secret or something. They were amazing. They were so interesting and so good, and just like kept me glued to my Kindle. I got a Kindle this year. Reading on my Kindle made me read those 2 books super quickly. They were really interesting, and I just really got into mystery books thanks to her books I read this year. I recently read this book, and I absolutely loved it, and that was The Spanish Love Deception. We have another feuding rivalry in the workplace to forced dating at a wedding to lovers. The trope worked. It was not a lot of toxic energy between the two, which I do appreciate. With, you know, the enemies to lovers, you have to have like a toxic point where you're like, okay, why aren't you two together? You're going through like a really annoying and unnecessary fight. That did not happen. That did not happen in Spanish Love Deception, which I appreciated. I need an Aaron. I need him right now. The next books I'm going to talk about, I'm going to kind of clump into one, and that is the series, I don't think there's a name for it, but it's a series by Abby Jimenez that it goes in this order. It's The Friend Zone, The Happy Ever After Playlist, and Life's Too Short. Abby Jimenez, I love you. I think I read them all within a week. They are in that order, but you don't have to, I guess you don't have to read them in that order. It's not like first book, second book, third book, but they all are within the same universe and follow different couples. I loved these books. They were different romances that had so much complexity and just different like real life issues and tragedies and layers and so many things that I haven't found in romance books before. They were also kind of steamy at times too, but they had a good balance, and that's what I really enjoyed about them. I would highly recommend picking up Abby Jimenez's romance books. I think I have a few more books until we get into the books I didn't like. I just didn't want to talk really negative about books, so I put more books I liked this year, but the next 2 books are by the same author, Lynn Painter, one of my favorite books. So I picked up 2 books of hers that I really enjoyed in 2023, and those were Betting on You and The Do-Over. Betting on You actually got released in the end of November, and I really liked that. It was really cute. It was, you know, a bet between 2 friends, they fall in love, yada yada yada. And then The Do-Over was about a girl who relives the same day over and over again, like a time warp. Love seeing a good character development, and that happened in The Do-Over. Do-Over, and then I think male protagonist ends up getting sucked into the time warp in the Do-Over. But I read it in a car ride, and if I can finish a book in a car ride, you know it was good. The next 3 books were definitely a bit of a different pace for me. I feel like I've never really picked up nonfiction, self-help, advice column books before, but last year was my year for that, and I'm going to continue to do it in this new year. I feel like they've really helped me go through personal things and really opened a new genre of books for me to dive into. The first book I'm going to talk about is Tiny Beautiful Things, Advice from Dear Sugar. This book was super interesting. It followed Cheryl Strayed, who was the author, but she goes by the title Sugar. She basically had different people write to her with their very, very heavy issues that are occurring in their life that they needed advice on. And when I say heavy issues, there were so many things like divorce, death, illness, you know, infidelity, like just heavy topics, and people talking so in depth about their issues. And the way that Sugar essentially addressed them and kind of gave advice to these people writing to her was nothing like I've seen before in like an advice column. She ties in a lot of her own personal experiences, and obviously she can't give 100% advice on what to do about certain situations, but she opens up with her own experiences and kind of helps connect, you know, whatever she's gone through with whoever's writing to her, and that's what I really appreciated. It really made me realize that, you know, whatever you're going through, like there's gonna be someone out there who's going through something, you know, very similar and can connect with you, and it just made me feel less alone, even though not all of the topics discussed I could relate to, but some of them hit so close to me and hit a little bit too close to home. It was a very emotional book, but I would recommend it to anyone. I really appreciated reading that book last year. My favorite author this year has to be Dolly Alderton. Again, with the self-help advice genre, we have Dear Dolly and Everything I Know About Love. Everything I Know About Love was more of an autobiography book. Everything I Know About Love, I just connected with so much because Dolly really broke down all of her emotions as a young girl in her 20s and everything she struggled with. And she just like spoke way too close to the heart for me. I just related to so much in that book. I felt so seen, felt so heard. I would read that book over and over again. And then when it comes to Dear Dolly, that book I really connected with more so because she gave a lot of direct advice, and a lot of the letters she decided to pick to put in the book had to do with issues I go through, and I just needed to hear that advice myself. Like I genuinely did, and that came in a time where I really needed it. And so those 2 books really shaped me as a person today, but more so for everything I went through in 2023, and it really helped me for the better. Dolly, I love you. I'm so glad I picked up your books, and I cannot wait to read her future books. Let's get to the bad books, okay? Let's get to the book. We're gonna start out with a book called The Wife Between Us. Now again, take all of my criticism as you will. This is not a jab at the authors. This isn't a jab if you enjoyed these books. Again, I have a super subjective opinion, obviously. The Wife Between Us was very confusing. Again, I'm a #1 hater of an unreliable narrator. I don't care if it just like it makes sense for the book, like oh, like the last 20 pages you find out why the character or the narrator was unreliable. Like I don't care if you find out, if you don't find out. It still makes the book confusing, and I'm not gonna want to get through it. The Wife Between Us, my sister really recommended to me. It wasn't bad, but it just was again very confusing. And then like I think midway through, not even like 2/3 the way through, you find out why, but the way the author does it, it's so subtle, it's like you could miss it easily. And then it's like, oh, I get it, but like why did she do that? So with that being said, The Wife Between Us is a little bit confusing, but it ends up making sense. You end up just not liking the main character, and that's what I hate about books sometimes, is I sometimes just don't want to hate the main character. Like I want to enjoy the book, and if it's just all about a toxic, you know, obnoxious main character, I'm just gonna lose interest. Okay, this next book I'm really sad I didn't enjoy, and that is romantic comedy. The book has a basically like fake SNL show called The Night Owls or The Friday Night Owls or something like that. It's basically SNL with a different name, and one of the main writers there falls in love, and you follow the relationship between her and one of the musical guests on the show that just gave like Noah Kahn vibes. But then the pandemic happened. I don't think I've talked about it before in this video, but I read a book called Kiss Her Once for Me. That was the first book I read in 2023. I just didn't have it on the list because I forgot about it. That book also has COVID in it, and there's masks and there's COVID testing, and this book, romantic comedy, follows their relationship during the pandemic. So like 60 pages are just emails back and forth. I don't know, I lost interest immediately after he was like not the musical guest on the show. With that being said, that book wasn't for me. It could have done better, but it didn't. Also, it is raining and the lighting has changed so much in this video, so I do apologize, but we're almost to the last couple of books. The Fine Print is our next book. Honestly, have not read too much smut in my life. If you don't know what smut is, go Google it. I'm not going to be the one to explain it to you, but I read this book because I was really bored. I wanted to read a fun smut book. I don't know if it was too fun for me. The Fine Print essentially is in this series of 3 books which each follow a different brother in this Disneyland-esque dynasty where their grandfather started this theme park empire called Dreamland. It's basically Disneyland. Each have a different task to do to receive their part of the inheritance. So the first book follows one of the brothers who falls in love with this employee who used to be an engineer, and then she works at the Bibbidi Bobbidi boutique, like in the series, if that makes sense, if you know what that is, at Disneyland. They fall in love, but of course it's not like a cute romantic, like it's smut, you know, like it's not like this like cutesy romance book. It ended a little weird. I didn't want to read the rest of the books. It left a bad taste in my mouth, but I should have known that. It was 500 pages and I read it all in one day. The sad thing is, a lot of the books that I find really not even good, but I'm hooked, aren't even good books. Like I will be hooked to a really bad book and then like question why I read it in the first place. And the next book that falls down that rabbit hole is Tell Me Lies. Oh my god, this book makes me so angry. This is the last book I read for 2023. The main reason I read it is I was like, there's a Hulu show, I can watch that afterwards, like yay. I will never watch that Hulu show. It is so different than the book, like completely different. The only similarities are the 2 characters' names. I could rant about Tell Me Lies for a very long time, but it essentially follows a very toxic main character, Lucy, with a very toxic man named Steven, and their very toxic relationship. I mean, I could not put it down was the problem, but then I finished it, hated my life afterwards. It left me so unfulfilled. I did not like the way it ended. It just wasn't my favorite book. The last book we're gonna be talking about for this video is called Something Borrowed by Emily Giffin. I'm actually reading the sequel as we speak. Something Borrowed is about a main character, Darcy. No, that's not her name. Rachel. The main character's name is Rachel. Rachel has a best friend, platonic male friend named Dexter, all throughout law school. And then she introduces him to her best friend Darcy, and they date and get engaged and yada yada yada. Dex and Rachel end up cheating on each other throughout basically the entire book. But to make up for the fact that they're basically, you know, cheating on Darcy is the fact that Darcy is insufferable and a horrible character. And that like justifies it. And I'm not sure to what extent like an okay or good thing to do, you know what I mean? I lost the rest of that clip, so I'm gonna finish where I left off. The main thing I was trying to get at with Something Borrowed is, yes, Darcy is a very insufferable character. She doesn't necessarily do anything wrong that makes it justifiable for her to be cheated on by Dex and Rachel. She doesn't do enough for us to be like, yes, Rachel and Dex are getting together, like woohoo, you know what I mean? You find out, I'll just, spoiler alert, you find out at the end of the book that Darcy is also cheating on Dex at the same time. But for most of the book, it is built off the fact that, oh, Darcy's getting cheated on, Dex and Rachel are together, and they don't know that she's cheating on Dex, if that makes sense. So that's where I just see like, is it justifiable they're cheating? But then I'm like, okay, it kind of is, because Darcy does cheat on Dex and then she gets knocked up. And that's where we have Something Blue, and this is the sequel. It's completely from Darcy's perspective. She's a very insufferable narrator, but nonetheless, I'm low-key enjoying it. Again, I am hooked to books that have characters and plots that I can't stand, but there's something about them. So I think what I'm gonna do in the new year is really incorporate all the books I'm reading in all my videos. Instead of doing this long video, I'll still do something like this, but I'm trying to read 60 books in 2024. We'll see where that takes me. Stay tuned, stick along for my 2024, or stay around, or whatever I said. Stay tuned for my 2024 book journey, and I'm just gonna wrap up this video. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time for another video. Bye! I post new videos every Sunday at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Okay, bye.